The radar signature appeared at 3:47 hours local time, a ghost blip dancing across the screens of three Dassault Rafale fighters patrolling the contested airspace above the Aegean Sea. What should have been a routine intercept of an unidentified aircraft quickly became something far more complex when the target's flight pattern began displaying characteristics that defied conventional tactical doctrine. Squadron leader Dimitris Kostas adjusted his helmet's visor against the pre-dawn glare, his eyes narrowing as he studied the anomalous readings. The aircraft below was flying in what appeared to be a memorial formation, a single fighter maintaining precise spacing for two absent wingmen, the mathematical precision of grief made manifest in aviation fuel and aluminum. It was the Widow's formation, a tribute reserved for fallen pilots, but no memorial flights had been scheduled for this sector. Falcon 1 to control, Costas transmitted, his voice cutting through the static-laden frequency. We have visual on the unknown aircraft. Single-seat fighter appears to be American manufacture, F-16 variant, but the profile's off. She's flying alone but maintaining formation discipline for missing wingmen. The response crackled back immediately. Falcon 1, you are cleared to intercept. Standard protocols apply. Unknown aircraft has violated Greek airspace without proper authorization codes. As the three Rafales descended toward the solitary fighter, something in the target's flight characteristics triggered a memory in Costas's mind. Something about the way the aircraft maintained its heading despite being obviously outgunned, the stubborn defiance in its steady course. He had seen this before, years ago, in a different theater of operations. The F-16 below was not running. It was not evading. It was flying a pattern that spoke of honor, loss, and something deeper than mere territorial violation. The aircraft's movements were too precise, too emotionally charged to be a simple border crossing. This was a pilot with a purpose, someone carrying a burden that transcended geopolitical boundaries. Falcon 2, do you copy the formation she's maintaining? Costas asked his wingman, Lieutenant Commander Elena Stavros, whose own family had lost pilots in conflicts past. Copy lead. That's textbook Widow's formation. Someone's honoring the dead up there. The mystery deepened as Costas realized that intercepting this aircraft might mean interrupting something sacred. A ritual of remembrance played out at 30,000 feet, where the only witnesses were the stars fading into dawn and three French-built fighters closing in from above. The question was no longer about airspace violations, but about the story this unknown pilot was writing across the Mediterranean sky, one lonely turn at a time. Below them, the F-16 continued its methodical pattern, unwavering and purposeful, carrying secrets that demanded understanding rather than simple enforcement of international law. The morning light began to reveal details that would change everything the intercepting pilots thought they knew about their mission. The target aircraft bore unusual markings. Squadron leader Costas had logged over 3,000 hours in military aviation, from training sorties over the rocky terrain of Crete to combat missions in multinational operations across 3 continents. He had intercepted smugglers, escorted diplomats, and faced down hostile aircraft in tense standoffs that required surgical precision rather than brute force. But he had never encountered a situation quite like this one. The F-16 below maintained its formation spacing with mechanical perfection, each turn executed with the kind of muscle memory that came only from years of intensive training. This was not some civilian joyrider who had wandered into restricted airspace, nor was it a military pilot who had simply lost situational awareness. The flight pattern suggested someone intimately familiar with combat aviation protocols, someone who understood the symbolic weight of flying alone while maintaining space for ghosts. Control, Falcon 1 requesting background on any memorial flights scheduled for this sector, Costas transmitted, already knowing the answer would be negative. Official memorial flights were coordinated weeks in advance, with proper diplomatic channels cleared and international observers notified. This was something else entirely. Lieutenant Commander Stavros pulled her Rafale into a closer inspection position, her aircraft's sophisticated sensors beginning to paint a more detailed picture of their quarry. "Lead, I'm getting cleaner readings on the airframe now. That's definitely an F-16, but look at the configuration. Single seat, but she's carrying empty wing pylons. No ordnance, no external tanks, just flying clean and fast." The radio crackled with a transmission from Falcon 3, pilot Captain Nikos Petru. "Lead, check your 6 o'clock reference point. Look at the precision of those turns. Whoever's flying that bird is marking specific geographical coordinates. This isn't random wandering." Costas felt his pulse quicken as the implications became clear. The unknown aircraft was not simply flying in memorial formation. It was following a specific route, marking precise waypoints that corresponded to what? Historical battle sites, crash locations. The methodical nature of the flight suggested a pilot on a mission of profound personal significance. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the Aegean surface and illuminating the contrails left by all 4 aircraft. From this altitude, the ancient islands below looked like scattered emeralds on blue silk, their strategic importance evident even to casual observation. This was where East met West, where cultures and militaries had clashed for millennia, where individual stories of heroism and sacrifice became footnotes in the larger narrative of human conflict. Falcon 1 to unknown aircraft, Costas finally transmitted on the international emergency frequency. "You are in violation of Greek territorial airspace. Please identify yourself and state your intentions." The response came back in clear, unaccented English, delivered with the kind of calm professionalism that immediately marked the speaker as military trained. "Greek flight, this is Viper 17. I am conducting authorized memorial operations. Request permission to complete current flight plan." The voice belonged to a woman. Costas exchanged glances with his wingmen through their cockpit canopies, recognizing immediately that this simple intercept had just become significantly more complicated. Female combat pilots were still relatively rare in most air forces, and the ones who earned that designation typically possessed exceptional skill and determination. The steady confidence in that radio transmission suggested they were dealing with someone formidable. "Viper 17, we show no record of authorized operations in this airspace. Please provide authentication codes and mission details." The pause that followed lasted exactly 15 seconds, long enough for Costas to wonder if the unknown pilot was considering her options, but not long enough to suggest panic or indecision. When the response came, it carried undertones that spoke of personal stakes far beyond routine military operations. "Greek flight, I am operating under special authorization from NATO Combined Forces Command. My authentication code is Delta 7 Charlie 99 Foxtrot. Mission designation is personal. I am honoring fallen aircrew from previous operations in this theater." Lieutenant Commander Stavros immediately began running the authentication code through her aircraft's secured communications system, but Costas found himself more intrigued by what hadn't been said. The pause before the word personal suggested layers of meaning that standard intercept protocols weren't designed to address. "Viper 17, while we verify your codes, please explain the nature of your memorial operations. Your current flight pattern suggests specific geographical targets." Another measured pause. "Greek flight, I am flying the final mission profile for aircrew lost during Operation Enduring Resolve, September 2019. 2 aircraft went down in this sector during a humanitarian supply drop. I am completing their route." The authentication came back positive, but with unusual addendums that made Costas frown at his display screen. NATO had indeed authorized the flight, but under special circumstances that referenced psychological support operations and survivor assistance protocols. This wasn't just a memorial flight, it was therapy, played out at combat altitude with jet fuel and determination. Captain Petru's voice cut through the silence. Lead that operation. I remember hearing about it. 2 aircraft lost during refugee supply drops. International incident, lot of political fallout. Media coverage was restricted. Costas felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders as he realized they had intercepted not just an unauthorized aircraft, but a human story unfolding in real time. The pilot below wasn't violating airspace. She was exercising ghosts, fighting a private war against memories that could only be confronted in the place where they were born. The question now was whether to escort her through her mission or force her to abandon it for the sake of bureaucratic protocol. Below them, Viper 17 continued her methodical turns, unwavering in purpose despite being surrounded by 3 hostile aircraft. The morning sun caught her aircraft's canopy, revealing just enough detail to confirm what Costas had already suspected. This pilot possessed the kind of steady competence that came only from extensive combat experience. The decision he made in the next few minutes would define not only the success of her mission, but the way she would remember this moment for the rest of her career. Squadron leader Costas made his choice with the kind of instantaneous decision-making that separated effective military leaders from those who merely held rank. Years of training and combat experience had taught him to recognize the moments when rigid adherence to protocol served no useful purpose, when human judgment needed to supersede bureaucratic procedure. Falcon 2 and 3 maintain overwatch positions but do not interfere with the target aircraft's flight plan. Viper 17, this is Falcon 1. We will escort you through your memorial mission, but I need to understand exactly what we're protecting here. The relief in the American pilot's voice was subtle but unmistakable. Falcon 1, thank you. This is something I need to complete. The aircrew lost in 2019 were my wingmen, Lieutenant Colonel Jessica Phoenix, Martinez, and Major David Trident Kim. They were making their final supply drop when they encountered severe weather and mechanical failure. I was supposed to be flying with them. Costas felt his throat tighten as the full weight of the situation became clear. This wasn't just a memorial flight. It was survivors' guilt being confronted at the scene of the tragedy, a pilot forcing herself to complete the mission her friends had died attempting. The widow's formation wasn't just honoring the fallen, it was providing space for the ghosts that haunted the living. Viper 17 understood. What's your call sign for this operation? Another pause, this one heavy with emotion. Falcon 1, my call sign is Wraith. Captain Zofia Wraith Kowalski, formerly of the 52nd Fighter Wing, currently temporarily assigned to closure operations. The name hit Costas like a physical blow. He knew that call sign, knew the reputation that came with it. Wraith Kowalski was legendary in certain NATO circles, a pilot who had earned her nickname not through any particular stealth capability, but through an almost supernatural ability to complete impossible missions and return from situations that should have been fatal. She was one of those rare aviators whose skill transcended national boundaries, becoming the subject of respectful discussion in ready rooms from Ramstein to Souda Bay. Lieutenant Commander Stavros's voice came through the comm. Lead, I'm showing the historical weather data for September 15, 2019. Severe wind shear, visibility near zero, emergency beacon activations from multiple aircraft in this sector. Search and rescue operations lasted 4 days. The picture was becoming clearer. Wraith had likely been grounded due to maintenance issues or mission rotation, forced to watch from base operation while her closest friends flew into conditions that would claim their lives. The guilt of surviving when others didn't was a burden that destroyed as many military careers as enemy fire, and confronting it required the kind of courage that had nothing to do with aerial combat. Wraith, what does completing their route involve? I need to know what we're escorting you through. Falcon 1, The original mission was a supply drop to refugee camps on 3 islands. Phoenix and Trident made the first 2 drops successfully, but lost radio contact approaching the third waypoint. Their aircraft went down somewhere in the channel between Lesbos and the Turkish coast. I need to complete that third drop site, then fly their return route. Captain Petru broke in. Lead, that puts us awfully close to Turkish territorial waters, if she's planning to cross the median line. Understood, Falcon 3. Wraith, are you carrying any actual supplies for this memorial drop? Negative, Falcon 1. Just symbolic completion. A moment of silence at each waypoint, then proper formation flying through their planned return route. I'm not carrying anything that would constitute an actual border crossing violation. Costas found himself making calculations that had nothing to do with fuel consumption or weapons ranges. The psychological weight of what Wraith was attempting could either provide the closure she needed to continue her military career or destroy her completely if something went wrong. Escorting her through this mission meant taking responsibility for both her physical safety and her emotional survival. The 3 Rafales adjusted their formation to provide proper escort coverage as Wraith began her approach to the first memorial waypoint. Below them, the Mediterranean stretched endlessly blue, its surface concealing the wreckage of aircraft and the dreams of the pilots who had flown them. The first waypoint approached with mathematical precision, Wraith's F-16 maintaining exactly the speed and altitude that Martinez and Kim would have flown 3 years ago. As they reached the coordinates, she reduced power and began a gentle climbing turn, not the aggressive maneuvering of combat aviation, but the respectful, measured movement of someone honoring the dead. Phoenix and Trident completed their supply drop here at 13:47 hours, Wraith transmitted, her voice steady despite the emotional weight of her words. Refugees received medical supplies, food packages, and blankets for approximately 200 individuals. Mission successful, continuing to waypoint 2. Costas realized he was witnessing something unprecedented in his military experience. A combat pilot voluntarily reliving the final mission of her fallen comrades, flying their exact route and maintaining their precise timing, turning her aircraft into a living memorial that honored their sacrifice while confronting her own survival. The second waypoint passed with similar precision, Wraith maintaining formation discipline that would have impressed flight instructors at any military academy. Her flying was flawless, but Costas could hear the strain in her radio transmissions as they approached the coordinates where everything had gone wrong 3 years ago. Falcon 1, we're approaching waypoint 3, Wraith transmitted. This is where Phoenix and Trident lost radio contact. Weather conditions that day included severe wind shear, visibility less than half a mile, and emergency navigation equipment failures across multiple aircraft. The morning sky around them was crystal clear, offering perfect visibility and calm air that made the contrast with that tragic day even more poignant. Costas could imagine Martinez and Kim struggling with their controls as weather and mechanical failure conspired to create an unsurvivable situation, while their wingman waited helplessly at base for news that would never come. Wraith, we're with you. Take whatever time you need. As they reached the coordinates, Wraith's aircraft suddenly broke formation and began flying in a pattern that initially appeared erratic but gradually revealed its own internal logic. She was searching, not for targets or waypoints, but for some trace of her friend's final moments, some sign that their sacrifice had meaning beyond the bureaucratic language of after-action reports. Falcon 1, I need to descend to search altitude. Phoenix and Trident were flying at 8,000 feet when they encountered the weather. I need to understand what they went through. The request violated every safety protocol in the NATO handbook, but Costas found himself approving it without hesitation. Some missions transcended ordinary risk assessment, and this was clearly one of them. Understood, Wraith. Falcon Flight will maintain overwatch. take us down." The four aircraft descended together, breaking through cloud layers that had been invisible from higher altitudes, entering the same airspace where Martinez and Kim had fought their final battle against weather, mechanical failure, and the unforgiving physics of powered flight. As they reached 8,000 feet, the air became noticeably turbulent, reminding everyone involved that the Mediterranean's seemingly peaceful surface concealed atmospheric conditions that could challenge even experienced pilots. Wraith's F-16 began flying search patterns that gradually covered every square mile of the area where her wingmen had disappeared. The precision of her navigation was extraordinary. She was following search protocols with the kind of methodical thoroughness that suggested extensive preparation for this moment. "Falcon 1, I'm picking up debris on radar," Lieutenant Commander Stavros reported. "Bearing 127 degrees, approximately 2 miles southeast of our current position." The debris field, when they found it, was minimal. A few pieces of aluminum and composite material that could have come from any aircraft, scattered across several hundred meters of open water. But for Wraith, it represented confirmation that her friend's final moments had occurred in this exact location, that their struggle with failing aircraft and impossible weather had ended here. She flew 3 complete circuits around the debris field, each orbit perfectly spaced and precisely timed, before transmitting her final tribute. Phoenix and Trident completed their mission. They saved 200 lives that day before the weather took them. Mission accomplished, friends. Thank you for showing me how to be worthy of these wings. The words carried the weight of 3 years of survivor's guilt, of nights spent wondering why she had been grounded while her closest friends flew into conditions that would claim their lives. But they also carried something else: acceptance and the beginning of genuine healing. Captain Petru's voice cut through the moment with professional urgency. "Falcon 1, we have multiple radar contacts approaching from the northeast. Turkish patrol aircraft, bearing 45 degrees, distance approximately 15 miles and closing. They're likely responding to our presence near their territorial waters." The tactical situation had just become significantly more complex. What had begun as a simple intercept and evolved into an escort mission was now threatening to become an international incident, with Wraith's memorial flight caught in the middle of competing territorial claims and military posturing. "Wraith, we need to discuss your planned return route. The Turkish patrol aircraft are likely going to want explanations for our presence near their territorial boundaries." "Falcon 1, the return route follows international flight corridors, but it does parallel the Turkish coast for approximately 40 nautical miles. Phoenix and Trident would have flown that exact path if they had completed their mission successfully." Costas felt the familiar weight of command decisions that carried implications far beyond immediate tactical concerns. Completing Wraith's memorial flight meant potentially confronting Turkish military aircraft, creating a diplomatic situation that could escalate beyond anyone's ability to control. But abandoning the mission now would leave her psychological healing incomplete, potentially destroying her ability to continue her military career. The approaching Turkish aircraft were F-16s as well, probably from the 9th Main Jet Base at Balıkesir, and their radio transmissions indicated they were aware of the mixed formation of Greek and American aircraft operating near contested airspace. Standard procedures called for immediate identification and explanation of mission parameters. "All aircraft in grid reference 394512 North, 261530 East. This is Turkish Air Force Patrol Bozkurt flight. You are operating near Turkish territorial waters. State your intentions and provide proper authorization codes." The voice carried the kind of professional tension that preceded most international aviation incidents. Costas realized he was about to make a decision that would either demonstrate the best of military cooperation or create headlines that would complicate diplomatic relations for months. "Bozkurt flight, this is Greek Air Force Falcon 1. We are conducting escort operations for NATO Memorial Flight. American aircraft is completing authorized remembrance mission for aircrew lost in 2019 humanitarian operations. The pause that followed lasted long enough for Costas to wonder if the Turkish pilots were consulting with higher authority or simply processing the unusual nature of the situation. When the response came, it carried undertones that suggested the Turkish flight leader was facing the same kind of command decisions that had been weighing on Costas for the past hour. Falcon 1, Bozkurt 1, understood regarding memorial operations. However, your current flight path approaches our territorial boundaries. Please provide detailed mission parameters and expected duration. Wraith's voice cut through the international tension with words that carried 3 years of accumulated pain. Bozkurt 1, this is Viper 17. I am Captain Zofia Kowalski, completing the final mission of Lieutenant Colonel Martinez and Major Kim, lost September 15, 2019, during humanitarian supply operations. Their planned return route follows international corridors parallel to your coast. I request permission to honor their memory by completing their intended flight path. The silence that followed stretched for nearly 30 seconds, an eternity in military aviation terms. When the Turkish flight leader finally responded, his voice carried a different quality entirely, the professional recognition of one military pilot acknowledging another's sacred obligation. Viper 17, Bozkurt 1, we copy your memorial mission. Turkish Air Force honors fallen aircrew of all nations. You are cleared to complete your planned route under international flight rules. Bozkurt flight will provide escort through our territorial boundaries. The response represented something unprecedented in Costas's experience. Competing military forces voluntarily cooperating to ensure the completion of a purely ceremonial mission. The Turkish pilots had recognized that some obligations transcended national boundaries, that honoring fallen aircrew was a responsibility shared by all who wore military wings. Bozkurt 1, Falcon 1. Greek Air Force thanks Turkish Air Force for professional courtesy. We will coordinate escort handover at the median line. As the combined formation, 3 Greek Rafales, 1 American F-16, and 4 Turkish F-16s, began flying the return route that Martinez and Kim would have taken, Costas found himself reflecting on the strange convergence of circumstances that had transformed a routine intercept into a multinational tribute to fallen pilots. Wraith's aircraft maintained perfect formation discipline throughout the memorial route, her flying technique displaying the kind of precision that came only from years of intensive training and combat experience. But more importantly, her radio transmissions had lost the tension that had marked her earlier communications, replaced by something approaching peace. Falcon 1, this is Wraith. I want to thank you and your wingmen for making this possible. Phoenix and Trident would have appreciated knowing that their final mission was completed with proper military honors. The words carried the weight of closure, not complete healing, which would take years of additional work, but the kind of acceptance that would allow her to continue her military service without being haunted by survivor's guilt. She had confronted her ghosts at 30,000 feet and found them worthy of honor rather than shame. Lieutenant Commander Stavros transmitted on a discrete frequency. Lead, we're about to witness something special. Look at her formation flying now compared to an hour ago. She's flying like someone who's remembered why she earned those wings. The observation was accurate. Wraith's aircraft handling had evolved from technically competent but emotionally constrained to the kind of effortless precision that marked truly exceptional pilots. Completing her friend's mission hadn't just provided psychological closure. It had reminded her of her own capabilities, her own worthiness to wear the uniform they had died serving. The memorial flight continued eastward, following the exact route that Martinez and Kim would have taken had they survived their final supply drop. The morning sun climbed higher, burning off the last traces of coastal fog and revealing the ancient landscape where human conflicts had played out for millennia. From combat altitude, the strategic importance of every island and coastal feature was clearly visible, reminding all the pilots involved that their current cooperation was the exception rather than the rule in this historically contested region. As they approached the final waypoint of the memorial route, Wraith began preparing for the kind of formation flying that would honor her fallen wingmen, while demonstrating her own renewed confidence in her abilities as a military aviator. The final phase of the memorial flight required Wraith to fly the exact approach pattern that Martinez and Kim would have used to return to their forward operating base. The route took the combined formation over some of the most strategically sensitive airspace in the eastern Mediterranean, requiring careful coordination between Greek, Turkish, and American air traffic control authorities. Control, this is Falcon 1 with mixed formation approaching waypoint 7, requesting clearance for memorial approach pattern, American aircraft completing tribute flight. The response came from Souda Bay Air Traffic Control. Falcon 1, memorial flight cleared for approach. Runway 33 is available for symbolic flyover, then continue to Araxos for actual landing. Weather is clear, winds light and variable. Costas realized that word of Wraith's mission had spread through NATO command channels, creating unofficial but genuine support for her memorial flight from air traffic controllers who understood the significance of what she was attempting. Military aviation was a small community where news of exceptional courage or exceptional loss traveled quickly through informal networks. Wraith, you're cleared for memorial approach. Take us through their planned landing pattern. Falcon 1, Phoenix and Trident would have executed a standard overhead approach, 3-ship formation, braking for individual landing at 90-second intervals. I'll fly the approach solo but maintain formation spacing for their positions. The symbolism was profound. Wraith would fly the approach pattern for 3 aircraft while alone maintaining precise spacing that honored her fallen friends while acknowledging their permanent absence. It was formation flying at its most emotionally sophisticated, using the mathematical precision of military aviation to express grief, respect, and acceptance. As they began their descent toward Souda Bay, the Turkish escort aircraft peeled away with radio transmissions that carried unexpected warmth. Viper 17, Bozkurt flight departing your frequency. Turkish Air Force honors your tribute to fallen aircrew. Safe flight, American pilot. The professional respect in those words represented something larger than simple military courtesy. Combat pilots, regardless of nationality, shared experiences that transcended political boundaries. The knowledge of what it meant to trust your life to mechanical systems and personal skill. The understanding of how quickly routine missions could become fatal emergencies. Bozkurt flight, this is Wraith. Thank you for your escort and your honor guard for Phoenix and Trident. You've helped me complete something I've needed to do for 3 years. The Turkish F-16s climbed away toward their own airspace, leaving the Greek Rafales to escort Wraith through her final approach sequence. The symbolic flyover of Souda Bay would complete the memorial mission, allowing her to return to active duty with the knowledge that her friend's sacrifice had been properly honored. The overhead approach pattern was executed with the kind of precision that would have impressed flight instructors at any military academy. Wraith maintained exact spacing for 3 aircraft while flying alone, her F-16 tracking down the approach corridor with mathematical accuracy, while leaving perfect formation gaps for the wingmen who would never again join her in flight. As she passed over the runway threshold, she transmitted her final tribute, Phoenix and Trident mission complete. Thank you for teaching me that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's flying the mission despite being afraid. You've been with me every flight since September 15, 2019. Now you can rest. The flyover was witnessed by ground personnel who had gathered along the flight line, understanding that they were observing something unprecedented. A combat pilot voluntarily confronting survivor's guilt at the scene of her friend's loss, using the language of military aviation to express emotions that had no adequate words. Squadron leader Costas felt his own throat tight as he watched Wraith's aircraft climb away from the memorial flyover, her flight characteristics displaying the kind of renewed confidence that marked successful psychological healing. She had entered Greek airspace as a pilot haunted by survivor's guilt. She was leaving as someone who had remembered why her friends had considered military service worthy of their lives. Falcon Flight, this is Wraith, requesting escort to Araxos airbase for mission termination and proper debrief. Copy Wraith. Falcon Flight will escort you home. You've given us all something to remember about why we wear these wings. The flight to Araxos passed in contemplative silence, each pilot processing the morning's events according to their own experience and understanding. They had witnessed something unprecedented, competing military forces voluntarily cooperating to ensure the completion of a purely ceremonial mission, demonstrating that some obligations transcended national boundaries and political tensions. As they approached Araxos for landing, Lieutenant Commander Stavros transmitted on a discrete frequency. "Lead, we've just been part of something special. That pilot didn't just complete a memorial flight, she rediscovered her own worth as a military aviator." Costas nodded inside his helmet, recognizing the truth of that observation. Wraith had used military aviation as therapy, employing the precision and discipline of formation flying to confront psychological wounds that had been festering for 3 years. Her successful completion of the memorial mission represented not just closure regarding her friends' deaths, but renewed confidence in her own abilities and worthiness. The landing at Araxos was routine, but the debrief that followed would be anything but standard. Wraith's memorial flight had created precedents for international military cooperation that would influence policy discussions for years to come, demonstrating that military aviation could serve purposes far beyond traditional combat operations. As the aircraft taxied toward the ramp, ground crews prepared for the kind of detailed inspection and documentation that followed any unusual international flight. But more importantly, they prepared to welcome home a pilot who had left that morning carrying 3 years of survivor's guilt and was returning with the knowledge that her friend's sacrifice had been properly honored. The debrief session convened in Araxos Air Base's secure conference room with unprecedented international participation. Representatives from Greek, Turkish, and American Air Force commands had arrived within hours of Wraith's landing, not to investigate violations or assign blame, but to understand how a routine intercept had evolved into a multinational tribute that demonstrated the best aspects of military aviation culture. Colonel Andreas Dimitriou, Araxos base commander, opened the session with words that acknowledged the unusual nature of the morning's events. "Today we witnessed something that will be discussed in military aviation circles for years to come. Captain Kowalski, your memorial flight not only honored your fallen wingmen, but demonstrated the international respect that exists among military aviators regardless of nationality." Wraith sat at the conference table still wearing her flight suit, her helmet bag beside her chair, looking like someone who had successfully completed the most important mission of her career. The tension that had marked her radio transmissions during the early phases of her flight had been replaced by the calm confidence that characterized exceptional military pilots. "Sir, I want to thank Squadron Leader Costas and his flight for making this possible. When I planned this mission, I expected to complete it alone. Having Greek and Turkish aircraft provide escort turned it into something much more significant than personal closure." Squadron Leader Costas nodded from across the table, understanding that his decision to escort rather than intercept had created implications far beyond the immediate tactical situation. "Captain, Your memorial flight reminded us all that military aviation serves purposes beyond combat operations. Sometimes the most important missions are the ones that honor the dead and heal the living. The Turkish representative, Colonel Mehmet Özkan, had flown from Balıkesir specifically to participate in the debrief. His presence represented official recognition that some military obligations transcended national boundaries and political tensions. Captain Kowalski, Turkish Air Force, was honored to provide escort for your memorial mission. Military pilots understand loss in ways that civilian populations cannot fully comprehend. Your tribute to Lieutenant Colonel Martinez and Major Kim honored all aircrew who have made the ultimate sacrifice. The words carried weight beyond diplomatic courtesy. They represented genuine recognition from a professional military officer who understood that combat aviation created bonds that transcended political boundaries, that the experience of trusting your life to mechanical systems and personal skill created a shared understanding among pilots regardless of their flag of service. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Mitchell, the American liaison officer, had arrived from Ramstein Air Base with authorization to speak for NATO Combined Forces Command. Her presence indicated that Wraith's memorial flight had attracted attention at the highest levels of military aviation leadership. Captain Kowalski's mission this morning represents something unprecedented in NATO operations. She successfully completed a memorial flight that required international cooperation, demonstrated exceptional piloting skills under emotional stress, and provided a template for similar operations that may be requested by other personnel dealing with survivors' guilt. The implications were significant. Wraith's successful completion of her memorial flight had essentially created a new category of military aviation mission: psychological support operations that use the precision and discipline of formation, flying as therapeutic tools for combat personnel dealing with loss and trauma. Sir, I want to emphasize that this mission was only possible because of the professional cooperation I received from Greek and Turkish Air Force personnel. Squadron leader Kostas could have forced me to abort the mission for airspace violations, but instead, he chose to understand what I was attempting and provide support. Captain Petru, who had remained largely silent during the morning's escort mission, spoke up with an observation that captured the broader significance of what had occurred. What we witnessed today was military aviation at its best: technical excellence in service of human healing, international cooperation that transcended political tensions, and individual courage that honored fallen comrades while demonstrating the values they died defending. The words summarize something that would be difficult to capture in official reports or policy documents. Wraith's memorial flight had demonstrated that military aviation could serve purposes far beyond traditional combat operations, that the precision and discipline required for formation flying could be employed as tools for psychological healing and international understanding. Colonel Dimitriou looked around the conference table, recognizing that the participants were witnessing something that would influence military aviation policies for years to come. This debrief will be forwarded to NATO headquarters with recommendations for formal protocols regarding memorial flight operations. Captain Kowalski's mission this morning may become the template for similar operations throughout the alliance. The meeting concluded with handshakes and expressions of mutual respect that transcended the normal formalities of international military cooperation. Wraith had entered Greek airspace that morning as a pilot haunted by survivors' guilt. She was leaving the debrief as someone who had demonstrated that individual courage, when properly supported by military professionalism, could create positive outcomes that served purposes far beyond immediate tactical objectives. As the participants prepared to depart, Squadron Leader Kostas approached Wraith with words that carried the weight of one professional pilot acknowledging another's exceptional performance. "Captain, your flying this morning was extraordinary. But more than that, Your courage in confronting your grief at the scene of your friend's loss demonstrated the kind of character that makes military aviation possible. 3 months after the memorial flight, Captain Zofia Wraith Kowalski received orders transferring her to the 31st Fighter Wing at Aviano Air Base, Italy. The assignment came with a promotion to major and designation as a flight instructor, recognition that her experience completing the memorial mission had provided her with insights that could benefit other military aviators dealing with loss and survivor's guilt. The official citation accompanying her promotion made no direct mention of the memorial flight, but military personnel familiar with the events understood the connection. Wraith had demonstrated that confronting psychological trauma required the same kind of courage and precision demanded by combat operations, and her successful completion of that mission had marked her as someone capable of teaching others to deal with the emotional challenges of military aviation. Squadron leader Dimitris Kostas received a commendation from NATO headquarters for exceptional judgment and international cooperation during complex airspace management operations. The diplomatic language concealed the fact that his decision to escort rather than intercept had created precedents for military cooperation that were already being studied by policy analysts throughout the alliance. Lieutenant Commander Elena Stavros and Captain Nikos Petru both received citations for professional excellence during international escort operations, recognition that their support during Wraith's memorial flight had contributed to its successful completion. More importantly, their participation had provided them with experiences that would influence their approach to command decisions throughout their remaining military careers. Colonel Mehmet Özkan, the Turkish representative who had participated in the debrief, was promoted to brigadier general and appointed to NATO's international military staff, where his experience with the memorial flight made him a valuable advocate for cooperative military aviation operations that transcended national boundaries.